Welcome to the main Meta Snapshot. The purpose of Meta Snapshot is to capture the most powerful as well as popular deck list on ladder. Karakondzhul and I have organized the decks into 4 tiers based on power level, popularity, and matchups. One thing to note here is that popularity is quite important in these rankings, so if it was a tournament Meta Snapshot, it would look quite different as some decks have more power level, but due to its skill level, it's less popular on ladder. We use our personal experience on ladder as well as the data from top 100 to determine these tiers. This will be a condensed version. I will be putting the full discussion in another video. There will also be an article linked below containing the deck list and more details about the deck. So what you're looking on screen is the most explained about and the most defining deck of May, Aggro Hlalu. It is top of tier 1 and Joe used this deck list to finish rank 1 ladder. So you'll note this deck doesn't have Jarl and Conscription, which are found in previous list, but this is the most refined variant for ladder as it beats up Hlalu, which is very prevalent in the ladder. So the power level of this deck comes from mana and its tokeny as well as mid-rangey strategy due to mana buffing up its token creatures, as well as fervor. The deck list is quite easy to play. It's easy to win with this deck, but difficult to play optimally. You can misplay a lot with this deck, and this deck is very forgiving, which makes it very frustrating as a top tier deck shouldn't be this smooth to pilot. The decks that beat this deck will have trouble against the second most powerful deck on ladder, which is Uprising Scout. Now, Uprising Scout is centered around shouts and primarily Drain Vitality, as Drain Vitality crushes Hlalu, and you can use Soul Tear, which is the other shout, to beat up Control, making it a very scary deck as you have a good aggro and a good control matchup, which is what all control decks wants to do. So you'll notice that it doesn't run Tazcad and no more Baronesses. Instead, it has run Camel and Uprising. Now, Uprising is quite good with ramp and especially Necromancer. You can Necromancer draw minion and then you can Uprising it to summon another Necromancer target and get the draw from the summoned target. So yeah, the main card here to discuss is Drain Vitality. It enables this deck to be this draw heavy, and draw heavy greed is very good greed in a control deck. It only runs 6 2-drops, but Drain Vitality allows it to get away with it. It's just a very powerful deck, and you'll see this often on tournaments as well. Because of Hlalu and Scout as the main control deck to counter Hlalu, you don't really see other decks, and that's been quite frustrating, but we're here to talk about deck lists, so that will be for another discussion. You have Crushing Blows for the Gamblers, which are quite prevalent in the meta. You have Vipers for hard removal. I guess you have Pets as well. Yeah, it's just a very versatile deck. Also, Camel over Greybeard because Camel can put other stuff into your graveyard, which makes the Necromancer even more flexible. So this it's a very Necromancer focused deck. So these are the 2 decks on tier 1. First is Hlalu, and then you have the control deck, which is Scout. Let's move on to tier 2. So the top of tier 2 is a new deck to the Meta Snapshot. It's not a new deck, it's been around for quite a while. And that deck is Monk Strike or Monk Strike, Swift Strike Monk. Or you can just call it Strike Monk. So the power level of this deck comes from the fact that it can beat Hlalu with its Curse, Skulk, Hive Defender package as well as Monk Strike. Now Monk Strike is good against aggro and its reach against control. And combined with Swift Strike, it's a very scary mid-range deck. This deck will struggle against traditional control, but this traditional control has been pushed out by Scout and Hlaalu. Now this is tall and wide enough to beat Scout, and it has shenanigans like Swift Strike, which Scout can't really interact with. It can beat Hlaalu through, as I discussed, its low curve and defensive tools. So yeah, it's a very fun deck. You can even add Vivek in it, and Vivek is quite good against Hlaalu, and maybe even Scout if you hide in the shadow lane. And then you can shift into the field lane and hit for 10. It's a very fun deck. I would definitely recommend trying this out. I didn't use this deck list to finish in rank 2. Now the next deck we have here is one of my favorites, Midrange Battle Mage. Now Midrange Battle Mage was the top of tier 1 last ladder because it just controlled the mid-range decks and it had enough resource extension to beat the control decks. However, this season, Midrange Battle Mage has an okay matchup against the top 2 decks, but it's not as popular due to its high skill level. It's not as forgiving as Hlaalu. It can beat, so this deck, when I played it, beats like deck list on ladder, Hlaalu deck list on ladder quite easily, as they're not super refined as Joe's, but it will struggle against Scout because of Drain Vitality and the Viper package. Now, the way you win against Hlaalu is Breton Conjure. Well, Breton Conjure is known to win against aggro in general. You have Telvoss against mid-range, though it doesn't really exist. Cradle Crush is quite good against Scout, as it denies their Uprising, and it's good against Hlaalu, as it denies their token-y strategy. Now, against Hlaalu, you start smashing their face at turn 6. If they decide to play Jarl or something slow like Fervor, you can punish them by smashing them with your big defensive threats such as Telvoss and Cradle Crush. However, it's just Hlaalu can still steamroll this deck, and it can draw all its silences, it can draw its mana on 3, Hlaalu ultimate on 4, and it will just beat this deck. So this is the reason why we put it as the second deck of tier 2. Now moving on to the third deck of tier 2, which would be Nyx Ox Telvanni, which is essentially Shout Telvanni. So Nyx Ox combo is dead, but this is what is left of it. Uprising Ramp Nyx Ox. So again, it's a Drain Vitality deck. It's very sad to see that the top 2 control decks are just Drain Vitality decks, because it's enabled by Necromancer Uprising again, along with the ramp package. You're allowed to get away with these things. You just ramp and draw into Drain Vitality, Word Wall. This deck is also quite good because it's Ice Storm and Blackhand. I've played quite a lot. I think it's a very strong deck. It could definitely be Hlaalu because of its defensive tools. And it beats Scout because it's just a greedier deck. You have Devoth Experiments along with Genius Path Mage and Laneth, as well as Nyx Ox and Ancano. The problem with this deck is just not as popular, and it's a little harder to pilot than traditional Scout due to the combo-y aspect of this deck. And the last deck on tier 2, is my Telvanni Conscription, which I've shown you guys a lot of. I wasn't sure if I should actually put this on tier 2, but it has a good Hlaalu matchup. I just don't think it's popular enough, but there's a few people who played it. I actually didn't really play it on ladder. It's still very strong. You can build this deck to, like, this deck does not beat Scout, But as powerful as Scout was, it was not extremely popular on ladder, or just depends on the day you play it. This is very good against, I wouldn't say very good, but quite good against Hlalu. In fact, I've grinded a few Conscription Jarl decks with this deck, which is very impressive considering that you're not a super greedy control deck, and you're against a greedy aggro deck that has infinite draw. Like, it's pretty standard. You just cut the Drain Vitality package for traditional control tools, just such as Shackle, Guards, and more removal, as opposed to like full combo package, Uprising shenanigans. Yeah, this will lose to the Drain Vitality decks, but it could have a stronger Hlalu matchup as it is a very dedicated control deck. Now moving on to tier 3. Here we'll start with Chanter Tribunal. And Michaela's won the biggest tournament as of yet with this deck. It can beat Scout, but I think it will have trouble against Hlalu because it's just not as much removal or like lower end things. So you have the Chanter synergy. Sorry, this was supposed to be a Ghost Gate there. You have the Chanter synergy for late game. Like Chanter Rising of Bones is insane value. You have early game, but I just don't think there's enough early game to consistently beat Hlalu. You'll have 6 1-drops, or 8 1-drops rather. You have 2 Ghost Gates here. You have 12 2-drops, and I would say 6 3-drops since your Endure Masterminds and Soul Tears don't really count. It can beat Scout. You have Gas into Time and Death Priest, but Scout can usually outdraw or outramp Tribunal. It's a pretty fun deck, but just not as effective on ladder as it is on tournament scene. Now, next on the tier list is Aggro. I don't only have deck lists for it, but there will be some in the article below. So there's Aggro Archer and Temple Assassin by Indazoa. Those decks just go under Hlalu, but at the sacrifice of resource extension against Scout. So Scout, if they can survive the initial onslaught and find their Drain Vitality, those decks will run out of steam and will like run out of gas. So aggro decks are just not as popular, but they should be because they beat Hlalu. But I guess since to beat Hlalu, you just play the most popular aggro deck, which is Hlalu itself. The next decks we have are token decks. I'm going to showcase Dreamer Mage, as I really enjoyed this deck. This is originally Link's idea, but this centers around the central token strategy apart from Resolute Ally. You have Fervor and 5th Legion Trainer to buff up your tokens, such as Marked Man. And this deck looks quite fun with Mudcrab Merchant as well. So, the power of tokens in this meta is that it beats Hlalu, it's more consistent, just goes under them. Because you will find your curve more consistently than Hlalu. Also, you punish them if they decide to play Manner. However, against Scout, it's the same with other aggro decks. Against Scout, 1 Drain Vitality and you're pretty much out the game. And finally, at the bottom of tier 3, we have all the mid-range decks. There's mid-range Sorcerer, mid-range Warrior, mid-range Tribunal. They're just not very popular, but they do exist on ladder. So here I'll just pull up a deck list. So what I like to categorize this is purple mid-range. They're pushed out of the meta by Hlalu, which goes wide against them, and you really need the ring to win against them. Against Scout, they're actually quite good against Scout, and they actually punish Scout as they run a lot of tall minions that can survive against Drain Vitality. However, there is one card called Tel'Vos. Now, Tel'Vos eats approximately 10 to 20 damage against these decks. Because if they play a Troll and Stower, you can just place Telvos in front of them and you'll be quite happy. The only answer is Silence, and Silence is not an insane effect. The ward on face will eat 5 damage, and the 5/4 body is allowed to trade with a big minion. So that's the reason why purple mid-range, such as Sorcerer, Warrior, and Tribunal, are on the bottom of tier 3. Now, tier 4, there's not many popular decks on tier 4, so we've come up with some fun ones, such as the Abomination, if you like to call it fun. This Betamax's deck. It will beat Scout, it will beat Tribunal, it can beat Hlaalu, but Hlaalu's generally too fast for this deck, despite it consistently finding Drain Vitality. Of course, I've made a video on this, you can check it out. You just use Disciple of Namira and these go Fence to cycle your whole deck and just journey them at like turn 10. There's also Rage Dagoth, Mid Spell Sword. Of course, Spell Sword has been sitting in tier 4 for forever, and we've also put Redder and Doomcrag. So it's a very fun deck. I've been playing a lot this season. Kaseta and Aini played it last season. Very experimental list. So this deck list is quite good against. It will struggle against mid-range, but mid-range is pretty non-existent and is actually quite good against Hlaalu, as you have 3 Edicts of Azura, 3 Doucheniks for their manner, and you can answer it on curve. You have Chanter, which is hard to answer, and Rising of Bones combo. You have Conscription and Praetorian Commander combo for late game. It's not... So as with all Doomcrag, it requires a very specific style of gameplay to play. And it's not the easiest deck to pick up, but once you learn how to play Doomcrag or Tokeny Control, it's a very fun deck to play. I would recommend you trying out this deck. It can beat Scout, especially if you have Commander chains. So you can Commander into Necromancer Commander, and that will make your Conscription very big and survive against 1 or maybe even 2 Drain Vitalities.